So understanding that, what were some of the limitations of the chill cast cam?
We get guys out there just like, oh, it's not as strong as an OEM cam, right? And you're right. Chill cast cam isn't as strong as the OEM cam. Every year I go out to Hammers and I'll see, Brian Crower out there and we'll hang out, we'll talk. And it's like because he's been in cams, he knows that the Honda material is this unique material. It's the Honda's Chillcast B cam is not your traditional chilled iron cam. They changed the material in there. It has like a higher chromium content. I don't. It's been so long that I don't actually remember what was different about the metallurgy. But the Honda cam had a unique metallurgy that made the barrel a lot stronger than any chill cast cam. So that's why, people are like, "Hey, I want to show you your cams suck," and they throw it off of a roof. You know, the Honda cam doesn't break because you could say it's a partially cast. It's a partially steel casting. It has enough chrome in there to actually technically qualify as a steel and not an iron. So Honda's got a steel cam. I don't have access to that technology or that material. Brian doesn't have access to that technology or that material. None of the aftermarket people do. So, like aftermarket chill cast cams have a reputation of being more brittle. That's the way it is, right? But if you want a cam that's as strong as stock, you're just going to have to go to stock, or you're going to have to go to a steel-based cam. And there aren't any steel-based Honda cams that run on slippers.
Yeah, the shipping liability was pretty real over the years. Shipping a long camshaft like a JZ cam, you get guys that would get broken in shipping, and there were times that I got a piece of like 1/4 inch plywood, and I would put it in the box with the cams to try to isolate and strengthen the shipping because they would get wrecked on the truck. Or you get a guy that would bolt them into the engine, and he'd bolt half the cam in and leave the other half hanging up in the sky, and it would break the cam off that way. And on different engines, there were guys that used a combination of cam bolt and cam sprocket that didn't penetrate the nose of the camshaft far enough. They'd pull the nose of the camshaft off the cam too. So that was a thing too. But I never had a chilled cast cam break in the engine if it was installed correctly. Like it wasn't like you could break it when you, like you said, throw it off a building, but you weren't going to break it in operation. You just had to be careful shipping the thing.
You mentioned that's the nose of the cam, right?
Right.
What the number one reason we found these things to break was AEM cam gears.
Yeah.
And it was because their thickness was so much thicker up here that they barely had any bite with the stock bolt here. So it's exactly what you said.
Yeah, would pull the nose right off of it.
Right. So like on our cam gears, I know very specifically our cam gears are the same as stock. So stock thickness, and then aftermarket. And so actually in our camshafts, we actually include longer bolts just because we like, instead of telling everybody the disclaimer, nobody listens,
Right.
We just included a slightly longer bolt that would accommodate, thin and thick hub cam gears.
Yeah, that's cheaper than the Fallout.
Yeah, so that, like, the nose breaking off because the cam gear is too thick, that's one issue. Obviously, then if you put it in with an impact gun and then the bolt's not long enough, it's going to do the same thing. Or even using the impact gun is such a bad idea on chillcast camshafts. And then there's the guys that drop them, right? And I'm not saying that, like, the hard part is you don't know what people did to it. Like you don't know the journey of that camshaft prior to them breaking it. All you know is they broke it and it's automatically your fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So at this stage, what was the actual cam called? So it was a chilled cast skunk cam. I'm assuming that this was prior to the tuner series. So what was it actually called?
Well, no, so it was the tuner series. It was just the stage one tuner series that we came out with, and then we came out with stage two, and we came out with stage three.
So I know that the tuner series is notable for its color, that dark, sort of grayish black coating on it. What coating was that on that chill cast core?
Oh, that's a phosphate coating. And then it's funny because let's see if I have a picture of the.
I know that was a common complaint. Everyone complained about how unpretty the cam looks after use.
Well, phosphate coating is a break-in coating.
Okay.
So, if they wanted it to stay black, that wasn't the intention, right? And I'm just showing you here. This is another one of the issues with the chill cast stuff is when they started to really push the limits of these engines and they started locking out the rockers. You know how they're locking out the rockers and they're putting a ton of spring in there, so you have all of that contact stress on the middle lobe, right? So it's that middle lobe's trying to control all that weight, trying to control all that spring pressure, and it's got to deal with oiling issues, right? So when we see something like this, you can just look from the color. So that was probably that camshaft was seeing that kind of temperature. It was already annealing, right? So the once it goes bad, it's just going to continue to get worse because it's just getting annealed. Each time you run it, it's just annealing.
How much of a liability is it in the Honda community to have an unknown condition follower on a new camshaft? Is that something that you fought with over the years because people didn't realize that their rockers were beat up? I've seen some Honda rockers. Like I got some in the bottom of my toolbox that you can kind of catch a nail in some spots on the pad. Was that an obstacle for you?
Now it's been almost 40 years, right? So the condition of rockers now versus the condition of rockers 20 years ago is completely different. If it was a little bit of wear, so you could see like a lot the lines of the side of the profile on the rocker, as long as those weren't too deep, it would probably still be fine. The Chillcast is really forgiving in terms of matching to tore up rock arm surface, but ultimately, obviously, it's not going to be good when you run it a bad surface on a good surface. The bad surface is going to get worse.
Yeah, it's just weird because coming from a domestic background, uh, you would always replace the lifters when you replace the camshaft on flat tappet stuff. You would never intermingle old lifters with new camshafts. But when I came over into the import world, um, nobody was buying rocker arms, and sometimes people would buy buckets, but not often. And it was kind of hard for me to wrap my head around that because in the domestic community, you could wipe a lobe out, you know, the first few minutes of the engine running, and it was just either cry about it or take the engine apart and fix it. It just some of those domestic engines were really plagued with lifter failures because of you're just dealing with splash oiling. Um, and I know that some of these engines have some provision for spray bar, where they're trying to lubricate those lobes. Because like when you go back into that temperature, uh, that rainbow of overheating the metal, and you look at that one spot on that lobe where it's been overheated, like, well, you don't have enough oil present to try
Right.
to protect your parts.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. Is a lot of times when we see stuff wear like that, it starts with oiling. I think it starts more with oiling than anything else.
I agree. Do you recall some of those older engines? Some of the Kawasaki engines, some of the early Indy engines, where they had a small hole drilled into the take up ramp, where it would leak oil out of the take up ramp to make sure the lifter had oil available.
Let me see. I have a set of Kawasaki
Yeah,
camshafts.
like a Kawasaki. Uh, what is that? Or Honda. I saw CBX had them. Some
Yeah,
KZ stuff had them, where it
yeah,
would leak oil out of the camshaft.
yeah. And I mean, like, I have a set of Kawasaki cams here, and the lobes aren't drilled, but you could see that they drilled the journals.
Yeah, but I've seen the lobes drilled on some old
Yeah,
motorcycle
that's fine.
cams.
I mean, if the camshaft's hollow, drilling a hole to lubricate it
Yeah,
is I'm doing some rocker stuff now, and like just having oil feeds in the rocker that shoot at the cam is super important to keep it alive.
yeah. I wondered why we were being hard headed about that, because it seemed like, once the oil is displaced, you're really asking the material to do things that it's not supposed to be able to do anyway. You need oil there to keep those components from overheating and from touching and rubbing and smearing and all the terrible things that happen there.
Yeah, I would say it's the overheating that starts the whole problem, right? And then if you use oils that don't have the right additives in it, like let's say there's not enough zinc or whatever they use to give more compressive strength to the oil,
Yeah,
as soon as it gets hot and then that oil flows out of there and it gets that entrainment layer gets squeezed out, and then it's metal on metal, and that only needs a little bit of time before it starts cooking that metal and annealing it. So a chill cast lobe can be annealed just like any other piece of metal, you know.
yeah.
So right
And
now we're
so,
probably closer to the tuner series. So you mentioned tuner one, two, three. You mentioned an important point with the phosphate coating.
so the phosphate coating is a break-in coating, and then the funny people would complain that our phosphate coating was a different color on the lobe versus the shaft, and that's because it's chill cast. The chill cast material is so much harder that the chemical, like phosphate, it's a chemical application. It can't penetrate into the harder material.
Got it. I mean, that's going to be a point that will surprise a lot of people because them understanding that that actual material was made to wear. It was more of a break-in component as opposed to a protective component to the camshaft.
You have a phosphate coating on a camshaft that's not chill cast, and you can see how it's pretty even on the lobe.
Hmm.
But on a chill cast camshaft, typically that lobe area is going to be a little bit lighter, just because the chemical can't bite into the material like it can on the softer parts.
Got
Okay.
it. And then in that case with that tuner series, I remember hearing talks of that tuner one just being a Type R copy.
The tuner one camshaft, that was designed by Jim Dewar at Megacycle. Same as the stage 3 camshaft. Those were both designed by Megacycle. In fact, I think the low profiles that he used were actually out of like IndyCar pace car. Do you remember the IndyCar pace car was the prelude for a little while back in a long time ago?
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah. So, when Honda was big into Indy, like big, just starting out sponsoring IndyCar and stuff like that, they had a Honda Preludes as the pace car. And so those were profiles that Jim Dewar designed for the pace car back in, I don't even know what year that would be, 90, early 90s, right? And then the one that we always get blasted on is the Tuner 2. People always say the Tuner 2 is a copy of the June 3. Um, and I will say that it's similar to June 3. We referenced the June 3 when we did the Tuner 2. But we modified the profile slightly based off of what we knew how to do back then, right? So back then it was more like trial and error type of stuff as opposed to really knowing camshaft design.
Was were the competitors going through the same teething issues? You know, like who were the competitors? Where are they in the game now? Were they dealing with the same type? Like you pulled that recall sheet out, and you had 20 guys that had a problem. Um, did the other guys get out easy? Were
No,
you
they
trying to
like
grow at a rate that was faster than what you had to the technology or the manufacturing support for? Like, how did the other guys go during that era?
the camshaft companies back then would have been like the Mugen stuff, which is Group A. You wouldn't even like the average person couldn't even get a hold of that stuff. In terms of what was available for the street, you had like June Auto Works, right? June Auto, and then you had Toda, which is the big. They do a lot of the Honda stuff. Um, interesting, like it was interesting to see the design philosophies. Like now that I'm older and have been doing this for a while, it's interesting to go back and look at the camshafts, and you can see the design philosophies and see how conservative they were, or how aggressive, or you know where they deviated in concept. You know,
Who were the most aggressive brands?
back in those days, it would have been the June 3 profile, the Skunk 2 profile, and then also the Toda C profile. But then the Toda C profile was really weird because it was like the intake and the exhaust cams were basically mirrors of each other, and that's not typical to do that. It's almost like let's design one profile and then like just flip it over for the other side. So that was interesting. Like you could never convince anybody of these things because everybody's got their favorite brand, and their favorite brand can't do wrong.
Yeah. Do you look back at some of that old stuff now, and with the amount of knowledge that you've gained in the past couple decades, do you ever revisit that early stuff? You said conservative just a minute ago. Those brands back in the day, were they overly conservative in your current opinion, or do you think that you were creeping up on it, or like when you the other day you posted this H22 camshaft video, and I was looking at the lobe of the cam, and I mean it's pretty gorgeous, And I go back in my mind and I look at some of the early pushrod camshafts compared to the stuff that I see at my buddy's shop. Like camshafts, the acceleration rates look like they've changed. People have gotten more aggressive over the years. So when you look back at your early work compared to your current work, what do you think?
So I've revisited the B camshafts multiple times, right? So after we came out with the original Mugen camshafts, and then we came out the Mugen hard face camshafts, and then we came out with our own camshafts. In 2008, I ended up redesign. Like after I learned how to design camshafts, I redesigned all the B camshafts in 2007 or 2008, and that was the Pro Series camshaft, which is still like people want to talk about all the old stuff, but the Pro Series stuff is 17 years old now. It's the old stuff, like people want to go older than that to grind whatever axes that they want to grind. But it's sort of like Pro Series came out with more aggressive philosophy than the tuner series. And after I came out with those camshafts, it took probably about 3, 4, 5 years before they became accepted as the standard.
Hmm.
Like every camshaft project that I've done, it's been years lagging, like in terms of people adopting it.
Right.
Right. Because over time, then the real performing stuff will all float to the top. Right. So all like when I came out with the Pro Series, it needed several years before it became widely adopted. And so on this new roller stuff that we're doing for the B and the H, it's the same type of situation. It's going to take, I believe it's going to take years for people to adopt it. Even though everybody who's put it in right now is making like 50 to 100 horsepower more. Like every single person, 50 to 100 horsepower more. Like they put, my challenge to people is like, put it in. If it doesn't, if it doesn't make more power, then I'll give you your money back. We even did a promotion like that before, but still not enough to get people to bite on it because this industry is all about following, and it's not about, being brave and trying stuff and learning that way. Everybody wants the worked out recipes that somebody else put the hard work into.
I mean, can
Right.
you blame them 17 years later? I mean, we just went sevens on a Pro 1 like 2 months ago.
The first 2 or 3 people was like, yeah, no problem, we can do it. And then the fourth person was Harvey Crane, and he's a real interesting, very straightforward, very direct guy. He goes, well, I'm not gonna design a cam for you, but I'll teach you how to design it. And my ears perked up, like, what? You're gonna teach me how to design camshafts? Like, that's an offer I couldn't refuse.